Hey, everybody, welcome to DBS Films Podcast. My name is Kellen. With me, as always, is my brother Brendan, and together we make movies with DBS Films. Today's episode, we wanted to basically take a look at how you can potentially make money in filmmaking in 2022. Now, the reason we want to highlight it is because there's a lot of different ways out there. There's a lot of different paths. You can look at more commercial things. You can look at being on set as a cinematographer. You can look at being the full producer. There's really just a wide gambit of things that range from the studio to the independent film production house, which is more so on our end on the entrepreneur side of basically creating the entire film itself. So we wanted to give our perspective, caveat, that's basically where we're at. But we wanted to go ahead and say, these are some opportunities for any aspiring filmmakers out there, anyone who's just curious at what are different ways that you can leverage a filmmaking career in 2022. As always, be sure to go ahead and follow us online. Our Discord channel is the place to be because we make movies for our fans with our fans, which means we actively cast for all of our movies within the Discord channel. You can open audition for it and you can be in our movies, as well as get a whole bunch of super fun behind the scenes stuff. And it's just a great place in general. So with that being said, and hopping into filmmaking, I think the first thing to kind of highlight in this episode, and we're going to do two parts on it, is just the different ways out there. And then I think in the second episode, I think, people who are more interested in making their own movies and making money off, doing their own feature films, we'll get a lot more granular on that just because we have more of an understanding with our experience there. In this episode, I wanted to kind of just run a little bit of a gambit on where you can see yourself if you ever wanted to just make this a career of yours. So first place I wanted to kind of hop into is we always talk about there's really two tracks to it. You have the Hollywood system and then you have the independent film system is usually the two ones. We talked about, is film school worth it? Because it can really start you in one trajectory versus another. So that's really the bigger divide that I see right off the bat. So do you want to talk about how, there's that more standardized Hollywood system, and then now because of technology advances and things like that, there's more of an also flatter indie system developing as well too.
Yeah, I think there's definitely two systems. I think the Hollywood system, it's been around a while. It's been more stable, and there's good money in it. If you work hard and you have the ability to work for 14 to 16 hours and be on set and have kind of a chaotic schedule, you can make a lot of money by just being a part of the movie system. You don't need to be a director or a cinematographer. Grips make a good amount of money. There's giant crews. They're always looking for people who are hardworking. But that being said, it's going to take you a long time to actually make the movie that you want. So if you do want to make money, you can go into the Hollywood system. But if you really want to make movies and have your own products out there and be in control of your own creativity, it may take you 10, 15, 20 years to even be, in the director's chair. And if you even get there, you're probably dealing with high level producers that are going to have a lot of input. So your creative ability is going to be limited. So that's just something you need to be aware of. On the indie front, there probably is no money. You're probably actually have to bring money to the table to fund your movie. But the pro is you're going to be in charge of this project. You're going to be the one driving force, and you're going to make the movie that you want to make. So I think you can make money with both of these, but there's definitely more stability in the Hollywood system, but there's less creativity. Unless you hit it big right off with a short or some kind of feature that gets picked up and you're given like a lot of creative freedoms, which is very, very rare. And then you have the indie side, which is you're probably gonna have to pay to play. Essentially, you're gonna have to bring your own money, raise your own funds to make your own movie, but you'll have pretty much unlimited creative freedom to make, whatever feature movie you want to make. So you kind of have to think about what you want to do, what your goals are, and how you want to proceed.
I think that's a really good way to kind of outline the major pros and cons of both. You're really sacrificing a lot of creativity, you're sacrificing a lot of control for the stability, but on the other end, there's not really that much stability in the sense of you might not be sure where your paycheck's coming from, let alone if you have enough funds to finish your feature. So let's go ahead and kind of hop in just a little bit more on the Hollywood system. And again, we're basically on the other end, so we'll be able to give you a lot more in depth. But we, focus a lot in the film industry. We consume a lot of information on just different podcasts and just different videos out there, highlighting just what the Hollywood system is like. So we really try and stay up to date when it comes to that. But if you're looking, more so for like a Hollywood or traditional, streaming services in that sense, I feel like Hollywood and the big streamers are kind of molding into one now. What would kind of be some of those recommendations? I think, from what we've been discussing, especially on the film school one, this is actually one of the benefits potentially of a film school is creating connections that might get you higher up in the order just right off of the bat, which again could save you a few years to get that opportunity. But you got to work hard for that connection. By no means is the diploma the connection to that. That's more or less you going above and beyond, finding someone, finding work, getting, up that scale a little bit quicker would be a recommendation. And if you are in the film school system, that's something that I would, again, look at making connections, try to really plot out what is that career path, because you're basically going to be 5, 7, 8 years to really kind of get up to that position. So I think that's important to kind of focus in on, making the connections anytime you have a chance, especially if you're going to film school. I think another major one that I would argue is like the second thing is you got to go to a hub. So you got to go to almost like an Atlanta or a Hollywood or California or LA, just kind of a city that has a lot of opportunities, because just from our, set in itself, things come up, people drop, people add on, scripts get changed, things happen. And if you're able to be right there, that's something that's going to be greatly considered, and it's going to allow you to really kind of get more opportunities. And then I think the last thing is really be ready to work super hard. The way you're going to almost kind of outshine everyone else is by going above and beyond and making an impression on set. Something that we really talk about all the time is the actors that we want to work with the most, it's usually a factor of not only their acting capabilities, it's mainly a factor of what they're like on set, because there's a lot that goes into getting that performance. So I think, again, if you're looking at the Hollywood route, the recommendation would be look for connections, whether that's in a film school or just any, possible way that you can do with your network. Number two, make sure that you are in like a major hub. And then the third thing is make sure you really hustle.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think you're gonna have to just find a way to get your foot in the door. If you don't have a film degree, and if you can't lean on the university to place you in one of these jobs or network with fellow alumni, you're just gonna have to find a way to get your foot in the door. And usually that's like PA. You got to be a production assistant. And I guarantee you there's, if you're in a hub, like Kel said, there's definitely probably job openings for these things, or you can, network if you're working with other actors or people in the industry. If you become friends with them, they could probably recommend you. But I mean, a lot of these sets, especially bigger budget stuff, have hundreds of people. So these are hundreds of people that are on these sets doing a ton of different jobs. And you're going to start at the bottom, which means you're probably going to be getting people coffee or just watching equipment or doing basic PA stuff. But, everyone's got to start somewhere. As long as you can get your foot in the door, it's a start. And I think how you differentiate yourself is like what Kel said, is like you're competing with all the other PAs and all the other people at the ground level. You have to find a way to stand out, whether that's asking questions, being involved in the process, trying to, figure out, different ways and networking abilities when you're on set, to just doing your job and not complaining, would be a big thing. So I think, your steps are, you got to get your foot in the door. And then once you have an opportunity, you really got to make sure you're the best. You got to be the best of the best. There's hundreds of other people, trying and vying for, the next step up, and you just really got to go above and beyond. So, I mean, it sounds easy, but I guarantee it's very difficult. Being on set is a very difficult thing. And I can't even imagine, being a PA and being asked and tasked with all these small little jobs that, can be frustrating at times. But if this is what you want to do, if this is your goal, if this is, what your dream is to do, everyone's going to start somewhere. and the beginning usually is going to be very difficult. But if you keep at it, if you're the best of the best, I think you can utilize your opportunities and grow and get better.
Yeah, I think that's a big one in the sense that you got to just really try and find a way to differentiate yourself. And one of the big recommendations you made, if you are going for a film school, a more technical degree is a great way to do that. Having a skill set so that you're certified from a film school to say, hey, this person knows what they're doing. They're going to know the equipment. They're going to know the editing software, specifically editing. We always say editing is by far one of the most important aspects of filmmaking. It's the most important aspect. It's the one that gets the job done. And that specialization can help you get from there. If you're starting as a PA, you're gonna have to get through the muck. And I would say also try and specialize as much as you can, get moving in different directions. And yeah, it's gonna be a grind. That being said, again, some of the major benefits, you have really good stability. There is money in the Hollywood system. There are unions in the Hollywood system. There's just a lot of benefits once you kind of get to those different levels. And it is an industry that, you're working on the major pictures and everything. What I want to talk about now is kind of the cons of the Hollywood system, specifically in 2022, that I think most people might not understand if you're not really in the system as much. And I think the biggest one that I want to recommend, I have two big things. And the first one I want to kind of hop into is I think people will always underestimate this ladder that we're talking about, because I don't think you'll ever get to that director or that hierarchy level as easily as you think. And even then, I think you're going to be limited by creative choices. I think the overall thing here is Hollywood is a business, and it is a business model, and people are going to complain. There's a lot of Marvel movies. There's a lot of remakes. Well, what's going to guarantee to make money? A Marvel movie and a remake. So even when you get to the top of the ladder in the industry now is a big budget Marvel movie, or, you look at the other massive films that are being made out there. It's typically like a James Cameron or Christopher Nolan, and they've established that brand name coming out of the 90s and the 2000s and 2010s. So I think in 2020, the big issue is there's so much content out there. Hollywood has lost its stranglehold on content, which means they have to now be more marketing focused, more capitalist focused, in the sense of what's going to actually sell, what's actually going to do this. They can't take risks. And I think the ripple waves that you see from that is when you tell someone, hey, Hollywood, for the longest time, a traditional route to Hollywood was you make a short, you make a feature. That was kind of, for I feel like, the longest time, from the 90s, 2000 and whatnot. And I think because of all of the content, and I think because of all of the competition now, it's going to be a lot harder to break in that way. And even when you quote unquote break in, you're still just going to be doing whatever the system's going to tell you to do. And I think a lot of people, when you hear filmmakers and whatnot, they almost go into the Hollywood system thinking that they'll get a chance to make their movie. And that's very, very unlikely, in the sense that you're most likely going to be working on their system, in their system, with whatever they want. And I think directors are actually going to have less and less power as the system continues to develop, just because of how much content's out there.
I think that's a great point. And I think a lot of people underestimate how much power a director actually has. I think when you see a movie and you see a director's name attached to it, you assume that they are the ones with full creative control. In a lot of cases, that's not the case at all. The director actually has very minimal control. And the control comes from what Kel said, the higher ups, the producers, who will actually get directors, and they're directors for hire, who are attached to a project to get the project completed with the vision that the producers have. So the director kind of just manages the actors and makes sure the production gets completed. But as far as like their actual take on the story, how they actually want to do it, they may have very little creative control over this. And it's the same thing with a lot of television stuff. The writers actually have more power and more control than the actual directors. And as we move towards, we move towards a television model, even the streaming platforms now, if you're cranking out a lot of content, are moving towards a television model. So your movies are based off more television model. So you're having less control with the directors. This is becoming, what's happening right now. To give you an example, before we made the Shapeshifter, I tried to work with the producer's rep to see if we can raise more funds and try and shoot the Morgan Estate, which is one of our older movies, out in Georgia. And you have to hit tax credits, you have to do some certain stuff with that. And the producer's rep was basically like, look, what you guys have now is good. You're making money off your movies. You're making a lot of movies and you have complete control over this. If you go try and take this out to Georgia or New Orleans or Louisiana, you're going to pitch this script. You're going to lose control over this. Like, the producers will come in, they'll take your idea and they're going to make you make the movie that they want to make. And he's like, I have a million horror stories of a lot of directors who have pitched their passion project. They've gotten investors, they've gotten producers attached, and they've pretty much lost all control of the movie. In a lot of extreme cases, they fired the director who brought that idea to the actual producers. So you have to be very careful with this, but it's where the industry's going. Like Kel said, there's a ton of competition. There's a ton of content out there, and if you can't make your money back or you have a flop, it hurts a lot more. Back in the day, there's only so many movies released. If your movie is in theaters, you had a pretty good shot of making $1 million. That's completely gone now, where if your movie is not good, if it's not marketable, and they put it on all these platforms that are competing with our stuff essentially, and people aren't liking it, it's going to fall to the bottom. It's never going to get seen. And now you got to write off $1 million because that movie is never getting its money back.
And that's the hard case where I feel like people get into the Hollywood system because they think you can kind of get to a position where, it's glamorized. I mean, it's super cool. 80s, 90s, Hollywood, or early 2000s. Like, there's something that is just, it's very attractive in that. And I feel like you always have to take a look at filmmaking and understand that if you're trying to make money in filmmaking, you have to follow what the consumer's doing. And, this is what the consumer's going. And Hollywood is a multi-billion-dollar industry that's going to have the smartest people working on ways to understand how they can make the most money. And that's what they're always going to be focused on. So when you do kind of break into that level, that being said, I think another really big element when it comes to the Hollywood scene was exactly what you're talking about. Is we hear it all the time from like podcasts and just other kind of stories there. You mentioned producers, oh, we just need the producers or whatnot there. For the longest time, even if it was like in the 80s or whatnot, you could potentially find some money out there who would say, okay, what's this? All right, go ahead. We'll put the money there because you make a DVD and then you make your money back. And I think the second I hear an indie filmmaker say, oh, I just need to find a producer or I'm looking for these funds, as you mentioned, you lost creative control right there. Like, you really, really ended up having it. And what I would say is, I think, when we're saying, oh, there's one system in the Indian system, there's no reason whatsoever you can't dabble in both. I mean, I think one that I want to highlight is Jason Blum kind of basically working within the systems and then spawning and creating one of his own productions companies worth that. There's a lot of different ways for you to start in the Hollywood system, have a stability, have a paycheck, learn, and then that experience will help you out on the indie scene. So, you want to talk about how, as we're talking, there's like two paths here. You really can dabble back and forth with them. It's not like it's set in stone. So this is just something, though, that I think because people have the false assumption that, hey, you get to this in the Hollywood system, they keep going down that path when really they should, learn to pivot back and forth if they really want to make their feature or their project.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a hybrid system is probably the most beneficial you can get, because you've heard me and Kel talk about, we have a business that works with, working with small businesses, local small businesses, to create little commercials for them. It allows us to get some income, but also practice and hone our craft. If you're working the Hollywood system and you're on set all the time and you're seeing how these things are done at the Hollywood system, is very beneficial. And some of the best indie movies to come out have, if you go back and you look at the people's IMDb pages, they work on a lot of stuff. They work in the indie system and they have a familiarity with, number one, other people, so they can, get talented people, assemble a talented crew very, very quickly. which I honestly think for a movie, an indie movie, is pretty much half or more than 50% of the battle is just getting the right people in the right places. So you'll have the luxury of working with people you know are talented, but then you just will have a general understanding of like what style you like. If you're working with a lot of directors, you could see, what direction they're giving that's good, what kind of feedback they're giving. I think that's really beneficial. Like I'd really like one day to be able to just go on a whole bunch of different sets and just watch people and how they interact. And I can be like, hey, look, I really like this stuff. I like to bring it back to my style or try some of these techniques out. Or you can see something where I'm just like, I would never do that. That just seems horrible, horrible. This set is very inefficient. And then you just avoid those mistakes. So you're kind of learning by just watching people. And I think that's super beneficial. I think there definitely is a correlation with some of the better indie projects out there, the indie projects that are very successful, very, that look very professional, usually come from people who are in the Hollywood system. So you can do both. And I think the Hollywood system will give you some stability. And then you can save up your money and, take your shot on the indie system.
Exactly. There's a lot of ways to go about it. And, I think the one thing that I do want to mention on, the hybrid system and back and forth, if you are coming from a more traditional Hollywood or structured system like that, I think you really do need to almost kind of throw a lot of that ideas out of the window when it comes to like the set and whatnot, just because as we mentioned, you'll have like tons and tons of people and you really need to streamline it. Just from my experience, when we hear people coming from the Hollywood system, I think the biggest pitfall is they take a lot of the Hollywood norms, but the only reason they're norms is because you have so much money on them. And I'm not saying, you cut corners on things and you want to make sure people are paid, like at least depending on like the work that they're doing. But there's a lot of positions that are designed because there's excess money for it. And I think that's one thing to kind of mention, in the sense that if you are coming from more of that structure system, that's typically what we see. But again, in the same sense, we'll be on a Hollywood set and there's a lot of norms that we just would not know because, again, we have to watch it, and the things that we're doing might be completely illogical for one or two reasons. So there's always a design there. But I think, to kind of wrap up this episode, again, this is more on the Hollywood system, what we're seeing out there and what we're recommending as a filmmaker, like what you can do. And I think, honestly, as we're talking through this, that hybrid idea is probably the best. Get experience where you can, save up your money, make your small shorts, and just kind of do that. And that's basically what we do with the commercial business, which we'll talk about in more detail in our next episode, just kind of more on what you can do if you want to do more of the entrepreneurial level. But hopefully we can give you some ideas on the film, the more structured film system idea there. With that being said, I think the last thing I kind of wanted to discuss upon when it comes to the Hollywood system is, I think just like anything in life, you have to understand it's going to be a lot of work. I mean, it's going to take years and years and years, whichever path you take. And typically, as you were mentioning, you see the success stories. And what do you see at the beginning of their IMDb page? Usually 5-6 years before they started doing something. So do you want to talk about how just filmmaking in general, I think making money in filmmaking is a very delayed process. At least I'm hoping it's a delayed process in the sense that it builds up there. But really, when it comes down to it, you're putting a lot of work in now for a payoff on the later on term because of the filmmaking process, just to kind of build it. And that's true with everything, but I think it's a lot more hidden in filmmaking. I feel like you don't see it as much. It hides beneath the surface way more than a lot of stuff compared to, traditional careers.
I would totally agree. I think if you're trying to make films and make money on films, I think you're in the wrong business. I think unless you're completely passionate, unless you're 100% sold on this is what you want to do with your life, there's a million other things you can do. For the amount of work that you put in, you'll make way more money. I think this industry is kind of glamorized because the top 1%, the people who are really into it, make a lot of money, and you can make a lot of money, you get a lot of fame, and you can do a lot of cool stuff. So everyone assumes that's what you're trying to get, but the amount of work and effort to get there, for the amount of money you're getting paid, I'd probably say like that ratio is extremely poor in the filmmaking industry. I think you can take, if you want to hustle and grind and really work really, really, really hard, I think there's a lot of other career paths and ways you can go that will make you a lot more money and be a lot less stress-free and a lot more lucrative than the filmmaking industry. I think it's just where it is now, especially with streaming and the compression of costs and everything. It's going to be a cutthroat industry for at least the next 4 or 5 years. So yeah, anyone can make a movie now, but it's going to be, that just means everyone can make a movie. So now you have to really compete with a ton of people, and it's going to be very, very difficult. And it's a very stressful thing. You have to work extremely long hours, and those are all creative hours. I think it's very difficult for someone to work 12 to 14 hours and be completely creative for that entire process, where most people go into their job and they can read emails or do spreadsheets or be on the phone, and they may do like 6 or 7 hours of work and they're fine, but that's not creative work. Creative work is extra taxing because you're literally just solving problems for 12 to 14 hours per day. I think it's just very emotionally draining. It's very mentally draining. And if you have to do that for 10 to 15 years, I think that's why the burnout rate in the creative industry is just so high. It's very, very difficult to do that. To do that at a high level is even more difficult. So just be prepared for that. I think if filmmaking is not your passion, it's not what you want to do with your life, then I'd really take a hard look at other things, because you're sacrificing potential income to live your dream, essentially.
Exactly that. It's a tough process. And I think, again, we're not here to be doom and gloom, but we just want to be the reality, in the sense that that's the system that you're currently up against. With that being said, I think the best way to handle this system is to hamper your expectations. Again, a lot of people that we hear, it's like, I got this big movie. I know I'm really good. I know I can really do this thing. I'm going to put all this effort into it. They make the movie. It's not quite where it's at. And then maybe they make another movie or they're done. And it's a totally understandable process because of the expectations that you kind of set for yourself. Whereas if you take it from, hey, I'm going to save up some money, I'm going to make a little short with my buddy, I'm going to make save some more money, I'm going to keep doing some shorts, but I enjoy doing the shorts, and this is part of that process. That's going to be a much better way to approach the filmmaking element. Just with that in mind, you're still going to work really hard no matter what. So it's one of those things where hard work's going to take it. Hopefully you got some good tips from this episode if you are going that direction. In part 2, we're going to really dive into the indie filmmaking side, in the sense of producing your own movies that you can then distribute and make money from, as well as ways that you can supplement it more on the entrepreneur level. But we're always going to continue to try and help out filmmakers as much as we can. So if you ever have any questions whatsoever, please join our Discord, be part of the conversation, be part of the community. We make movies for our fans, with our fans, so we're always happy to help. But until then, have a good one.